Hi, I'm Emily Magnuson, and I'm doing a mock interview for the laboratory technician's position being advertised at the National Wildlife Health Center. First question, how do you envision your role in the position contributing to the overall mission of our organization? So I imagine that this technician's position will be similar to positions I've held in the past. I am assuming that there will be, the specifics of the procedures and sampling methods will be different. Some of them will be the same. I'll receive new training on some of these new techniques, but overall kind of the expectations and duties should be similar to work I've had in the past. However, this is a national level institution, so the scope and impact of the data and results of projects being conducted at the center is greater. That it could mean more. The results of these projects could mean more. So I think the combination of my previous work experiences and my personal qualities related to responsibility and professionalism will make me ready for this greater responsibility at a national institution. Second question, how would I go about establishing my credibility with a team? So I have very good interpersonal skills. I'm easy to get along well with other people. I have good self-awareness. I have a good work ethic. Honestly, I think these qualities are such a fundamental part of my personality that they're apparent to other people just through basic interactions. So I think entering a new work group with my same personal interactions and work ethic will establish credibility of my own skills on its own. Question 3, can you describe a situation in which your work was criticized? So yes, during my first year at my Fish and Wildlife job, I was doing a training and I didn't quite understand something, and I just kind of figured out what to do rather than ask a question about it. And later, while we were working, my coworkers and I were working in the lab, my supervisor saw what I was doing and said, "No, you can't do that. You're contaminating the samples," which contaminated samples aren't a huge deal, but it's important. Like, that's a waste of money and time, and contamination can affect overall data quality, and that's really bad. So I was really embarrassed that I had made this mistake, with some awareness that the mistake was going on and not spoken up about it, and that this interaction was occurring in front of my coworkers, but I was still able to push those emotions aside and have a discussion with my boss about how this had happened and what to do in training to avoid that in the future. And that was 7 years ago, and I still think during new training about that, and have always acted differently afterwards. Question 4, what irritates you about other people and how do you handle it? I really dislike it when people pick arguments or fights just for the sake of being right and like winning the argument. That feels like a personal attack. If it's offensive, it makes me angry sometimes. But what my method for dealing with this is I consciously try and recognize that that's going on and remove my ego from the situation. Recognize it's not a personal attack. It's just kind of the other person having this moment. And through that, with my ego gone, it's easier to, walk away from that situation without further conflict or later arguments. Question 5, what can you offer us that others cannot? I have an extremely good spatial memory, which makes me a really good laboratory worker. I'm really good at visualizing kind of how the data relates to sample IDs and how samples relate to the data being recorded and later analyzed and reviewed. Some of that applies like in the lab. I'm really good at keeping track of samples, remembering where they are in the freezer, if one is missing, ideas, just kind of like logistics of where the samples are. But also then kind of having a memory map of how, the end data relates to the IDs and relates to the samples, and knowing what's left to be done or where mistakes were made and that kind of like web needs to be filled in. I'm also pretty aware of my, lapse in memory habits or kind of mistakes I might make, little like habits, and I'm pretty good at recording thorough notes so that I can fill in those gaps. So that in combination with my really good kind of memory mapping of these lab components, my data quality in the end is really good. Thank you for the interview.